Most of us modelers have learned that chipping comes down to two tools, a sponge and a paintbrush. But what if I told you there's another way? Another way to get realistic, metallic-looking chips without hours behind a brush or trying to control the uncontrollable sponge. Today, I'm going to show you a completely different method that combines dark steel paint with chipping fluid. The result, subtle, grimy wear that doesn't just look like paint damage. It actually gives your tank that cold, battered, metallic feel of real armor in the field. Hi, I'm Ryan. This is my channel Sprugu, and while I get the airbrush fired up, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for lots more modeling tips, tricks, and tutorials. You can chip a model any way you want to. It's your model. And there's nothing wrong with the standard approach, but I've always felt it was a little flat, at least without spending hours to perfect it. It can also be a little awkward fit with the next steps in the weathering process, especially oils. And I think it tends to get washed out too. Plus, mistakes are hard to fix, and they can stick out like a sore thumb too. Credit where credit is due. I came across this method via a channel here called Nonpla. I'll put a link down below in the description. I tried it out on my Soviet SU-152, and I really liked the effect that it gave. And I think it works really well with green or solid color tanks and AFVs. But I was a little unsure how it would look with a three-tone German camo, especially with a yellow base color like this. Here, I'm going to show you how I did it on my 135th King Tiger from Rye Field Models, and you can judge for yourself if it's something you want to try. The technique here is the same as any hairspray or chipping fluid method, so if you're familiar with that, you should be fine with the basics. You are going to need a few basic things: chipping fluid or hairspray, pick your poison, either one's going to work fine. To me, a dark iron, XF84, or some other kind of flat-ish metallic paint, and I'll explain why a little bit later in the video. An airbrush, I think, is going to be a lot easier for this process. And then, of course, you're going to need some water and a crappy paintbrush or two. Old habits tend to die hard, so I did start this with a little bit of the old school two-tone paint chipping here. I did this because I wanted a few spots of the brighter yellow and some of the red oxide primer to poke out from the next layer of paint that I'm going to use for the chipping. Probably could skip this next time. I'm not sure it added a whole lot, but there are a few places here where some of the brighter colors do stand out. I think if you did want to use this approach to it, I think what I would do next time is go a little heavier with it, mark where you're doing some of the lighter chipping or red oxide chipping, so you can make sure to kind of come back and peel some of that off. Next, it's time to spray chipping fluid. The best time to do this whole thing is after the base coat is fully painted, details and tools too, and when you've got the decals on the model. Same as with any chipping method, but I think it's just kind of worth underscoring that here. So yeah, I'm just spraying on the chipping fluid. I'm using AK Interactive Worn Effects here. Like I said before, you can use whatever, hairspray, another brand of chipping fluid, whatever. Let's make a quick sidebar because this is something I always wondered about until I started doing it myself. Can you thin chipping fluid? Yes. Yes, you can thin chipping fluid. As a matter of fact, what I'm spraying right here is thinned down with Mr. Leveling Thinner, of course, kind of my go-to. And I do it because I find that it goes on a little bit more evenly and doesn't leave spots on the tank after you spray the chipping fluid. I don't thin it quite as much as paint. It's probably closer to 50-50 here. Spray it on in a couple thin layers around the tank. Make sure to hit everything, because even if you spray it where you're not going to end up applying the next layer of paint and doing some chipping, it'll be fine because you're going to come back and weather it, gloss coat it, all that good stuff. Be sure to let it dry after you've sprayed it on. Now, you don't need to let it dry too long. After I applied this chipping fluid, I cleaned my airbrush, of course, grabbed a snack, and after 30 minutes or so, I was ready for the next step. And now it's time to apply the paint. I'm spraying on dark iron here. It's a similar method to how I did the camo patterns if you saw that video. If not, I've linked it here in the description above. I'm thinning the paint about 60-40 to 70-30. I'm using a much lower pressure on my air compressor, probably about 15 PSI. And I'm spraying really close to the model because I'm working in small sections. I don't want to coat the whole thing. Watch for tip dry. Splotches aren't as crushing as they are when you're painting the camo because you can chip them away, but it's still a thing you want to avoid. Now, the dark iron paint from Tamiya is really perfect for this because it's metallic, i.e. it has some of those shiny pigments in it that give it kind of that metal sheen, but it's still flat or mostly flat. So you don't get that unwanted gloss like if you were just spraying straight up silver or gunmetal or another kind of metallic paint like that. And then what I'm doing is basically I'm mapping out the edges of the tank with the paint, but going a little bit beyond, i.e. you can kind of see, in addition to going along the edge of the weld seam here on the turret or the side of the tank, I'm kind of moving it, giving it a little paint on the up and down side because that's where the chipping would happen. I'm also going to work it around the hatches, over seams like these or on the side skirts. Anywhere the tank is going to get chipped, might have exposed metal, or then this is kind of an important part with this chipping process, anywhere the tank could get grimy. So think about those engine decks, places like that. There are a few things happening here with respect to this effect. One, this is helping with shadows, which will cut down on some of the work with the oil paints later on, but it's helping kind of give those shadows around the corners, around hatches and these little air ducts and things like that that stick up on the tank. It's also adding a worn effect to the tank, aka a grime coat. This is where the tank gets beat up, moving around the forest and battlefields. It's where the crew moves around on the vehicle, stowage gets thrown on it, etc., etc. This is what I really like about this chipping effect, because not only are you getting obviously the chipping effect with it, it's just giving it that additional worn metallic look. This looks like a tank that's been in battle, not a tank that's been driving around and it's gotten picked up a few random chips here and there. This is a big hunk of steel. Yeah, it just looks beat up. I love it. Once the paint's done, you want to let it dry, but you only want to let it dry to the touch. 15, 30 minutes is really probably all you need. Don't let it sit overnight and cure, or else it'll be next to impossible to remove it. If you're like me, you've got a jar full of crappy old paintbrushes. So grab a couple of those bad boys, dunk it in water, and start chipping. Let logic and usage patterns be your guide for where and how much to chip it. Typically you want to do more chipping around the edges and the hatches. Like those are the places where the crew beats up the tank. Get the sides and the lower edges. That's where nature beats up the tank. Nature and other tanks and and enemy soldiers and things like that. And then because this is also a grime coat, you can go a little heavier with it on the parts and areas where things tend to get really nasty, like the engine deck, places like that. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just chipping away at it with my wet brush, working around the edges, working around where I sprayed on the dark paint, and kind of getting the look I want with it. Remember, this is pretty easy to take away, so if you feel like you go a little heavier in the paint application phase, don't stress it too much because, again, with the chipping fluid underneath there and the wet brush, you're going to be able to pull a lot of that away that you don't want. And that's it, almost. Another thing you can do with this chipping process, and I recommend this because I think it really adds to it, is you can give it some metallic highlights. Come back with a number 2 pencil or metallic pigment around the edges to kind of help heighten that metallic effect of the chipping. It's really important that you varnish it after you're done with this chipping process, especially if you're planning to use oils or enamels in the next phase, because that's going to give you the coverage that you need with the paint that you've just applied to it as part of the chipping process. Now, of course, that's not the end of the weathering process here. Next, I'm going to give this a pen wash, do some oil highlighting, dot filters, things like that, dirt, mud, all that good stuff that we love to do to really beat the shit out of our model tanks here. What you're seeing here is the model with just the chipping on it. No other weathering has been done to it at this stage of the game. I don't know that I would use this method over the standard chipping process every single time, but I do really like the effect it gives the tank. All right, let me know what you think in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to see the entire King Tiger painting and weathering process and lots more modeling tips and tricks. Thanks for watching, and happy modeling.